So when you're throwing with the coil, what you need to do to make a coil after you have your piece, like I already threw this. So the next thing you're gonna do is wedge a piece of clay, wedge it till you get the consistency like you would if you were throwing on the wheel. So I wedge it 100 times. It just makes it easier, and it makes it easier to center and not have so many inconsistencies in the clay that get like stuck on your hands. Because if you have any air bubbles at this point, it throws the whole thing off balance. So as soon as I have it wedged, oops, then what I do is I kind of turn it into more of a cylinder shape. Then I'm gonna take it and I'm just gonna throw it. I mean, if you're the type of person that it's easier for you to make a coil by rolling it, that's fine, but I need to get it going, so I'm just gonna kind of throw it on this plaster till it gets long enough, and then I'm gonna roll it more like a coil. It only needs to be as long as your circumference of your cylinder. So then I start rolling it by hand. Make sure there's no like dry pieces of clay on your table, because that would suck, getting it stuck in the clay. Try to make it as even as possible, because if you have a lumpy coil, what's going to happen is you're going to struggle with it on the wheel. So what you can do is kind of feel it, and where it feels thick, you just kind of focus on that spot. And you don't want it to be oval shaped, you want it to be as round as possible, which is sometimes hard to do. And just kind of let the motion of this rock it, so it kind of will extend and thin out as you go. So if you're like, I wonder if this is thick enough, and I don't know, I don't have a tape measure, like to see if this is long enough, just take it, lay it on the top, and that's good, because it goes all the way around. So the next step is I'm just gonna lay this down again. It lengthened a little right here in the middle, so I'm just kind of pushing it back together a little bit. Get a throwing stick. Are you going to use this? Throwing stick. Maybe cleaner's better, but no. And then you're going to make a groove as evenly as possible down the center of the coil. Maybe make it about an inch deep, or a ½ inch to an inch deep. So making 2 passes is better than 1, because you can really kind of get it more even that way. Then we're going to take this and put it on here, but first I need to prepare the top of this and make it into kind of like a V shape on the corner. It depends on how big your piece is, but just remember speed matters. So if it's pretty large, you want to go slower, because centrifugal force is going to force it open. So I'm just taking my fingers like this, and I am kind of compressing both sides until I get more of a V shape in the wall of the clay. And so far, out of all the ones that I've ever done, I always have a wobble somewhere. When things get bigger, you just get wobbles, and the thing is you have to work with it and let the wobble happen, but control it as much as you can. It's just when you have, oh great, when you have huge pieces of clay, what really matters are the basics, and if something goes wrong, you're going to end up dealing with whatever goes wrong the whole time. And honestly, I forget to do my basics when I throw all the time. So, oh well. So then you take the coil. And since that's wet, I don't need to worry about scoring this or anything. I'm just going to fit it straight on. And actually, as I do this, this is going to lengthen a little, so I'm going to end up cutting some of it off. The coil will lengthen. So I just kind of lay it down first so that that V goes straight into the clay. So then, I always forget how this goes, but let me see. Which direction? So if your clay is going this way, right, counterclockwise, then the clay is passing this way through your hand. So you'll want your cut where this joins to be at this angle. Maybe get a top view of that. So I'm going to cut this, I did it wrong, at this angle. And you can use a fettling knife or a needle tool, but you're going to cut it like so. I'm going to lay that down. And then I'm going to cut this. I'm going to try and match it. It's really hard, sometimes standing up over the top. So it starts here, right here, and it ends over here. So I'm just going to try and cut that as close as possible. I can always try and fix it more later. So I'm just going to notch that in. I need to cut more off. If you could do this as, what's the word, precisely as possible, you'll have less issues later, but honestly, like I said, you have to sometimes go with the punches and just work with whatever you have. So you want this on evenly. So what I do is I kind of turn it around and make sure that it's all situated the same so that this piece is directly over the top. Okay, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start smoothing the outside wall of this coil on both the inside and outside into the bottom cylinder. Also, what you don't want to do yet is you don't want to do any shaping to your base cylinder form after you get kind of like maybe it tall enough that you can shape this and let it dry out a little bit and then come back the next day and do more coils. This is a process that you can continue to do until it's as tall as you want. You just have to do it coil by coil. And if you let the bottom dry out as you're working and keep this covered in plastic, literally you could keep throwing till you go to the ceiling like Paul Soldner. There's also, I think it's called Onggi or something, a Korean technique that uses this. And you can look up a lot of videos on it that way. They're professional. They've been doing it since they were like 12. I've been doing this for 9 years. Not very long compared to them. I think it's Onggi. I don't know. Maybe get it from this side too. I'm about to Great. And I make sure everything is kind of in place. Generally when you do this, it'll kind of like bow out a little, so I'm trying to push it back in. So it's almost like hand building and throwing at the same time. Which is kind of fun. Maybe. It's also good to do this as evenly as possible, like try and take out as many flaws as possible just by like, it's a rhythm, it's all about a rhythm. Right, so now I'm gonna do my first pass with throwing. Actually, I probably should do the inside one. No, it's fine. So maybe come back on this side. Sorry, so funny.
That's fine.
Maybe over here. So then what I'm gonna do is just try and throw, I need a lot of water for this. And notice like I passed my sponge very slowly over that and it like totally made a twist pattern. So just remember this is so big that if you go too fast with your hand movements, this has to spin slow, right? So I'm gonna have to be even slower with my hands so that it doesn't kind of balloon out. So all I'm doing right now is I'm compressing to get this coil stuck to the cylinder. All right, so hopefully by now you know what recentering is, and I'm gonna do what's called a recenter pass. So what you do is you pinch with your thumb and either your middle finger or index finger. You're gonna pinch the side of the clay. You need to make sure it's wet with your sponge. Wet enough so that it's slippery. And then with the knuckle part of my pinky finger, the inside knuckle, I'm going to, as I'm pinching, push down towards the middle. And what this is going to do is hopefully even that coil out all the way around so that, see that blob that keeps going around? Hopefully it goes away. Hopefully.
Is that where you connected?
That's where I connected it. So it may go away a little bit, and all we want is a little bit. I mean, if you also notice, there's a little piece of clay that just came down the side here from that same join. When it's off, you can't even see it, but... So then the next thing I'm gonna do, if I feel slightly satisfied, oh, that's an air bubble. See that air bubble? Mm-hmm. That was from my join. Can push it like a pimple. Alright. If you feel satisfied with your recenter pass, like I said, it's never going to be perfect. You can always trim some of this off. I'm going to start throwing this higher. I could probably do a couple of coils, maybe 3, before I want to either use a heat tool and dry this out, or just leave it for the day and come back and finish throwing it later.
Okay, but I mean, like, there's not.
The same rules apply. You need to kind of find that place where it starts to bulge. See the bulge coming up, and the sponge is still pushing that bulge up, just like with throwing smaller cylinders.
Makes you smile this past few days.
It's just like I said, if you forget any of your basics because you're like, oh, I'm throwing something huge, go back to your basics, remember them, and then utilize those. Because the basics are even more important right now. Like having your hand spacing good, having what's it called? A good anchor. The problem is you're like up here and you don't really have anything to anchor on, so then it's kind of like figuring that out. So this is ballooning out, which to me, I mean, I'm not really too upset about because I want kind of a pot anyways, so I'm going to end up shaping this right now. Again, throwing with coils, you're going to end up having a thicker wall, which means you're probably going to trim a lot. It's just normal. Even guys who throw huge things, correct me if I'm wrong, like they throw pretty thick and then they just trim it. Or they just leave it and do a super long firing, which works too. But I like to have things that people can carry and move. not things that weigh 400 pounds, except for sculptures, of course. So I feel pretty good about that. Right now I'm just evening out the walls and feeling for any spaces that are kind of thin. I'm just pushing with my knuckles. I can push clay down into a thin spot or bring clay up into a thin spot, or take a thick piece, squeeze it and push it in. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now on the sides of the walls. If you fail at this 3 or 4 times, 6 or 7 times, don't worry, I did too. In fact, at any moment I feel like I could fail. It's just, Janine and Tony said once that you have to be okay with being out of balance, and I feel like this is one of those things where you have to be